Anyone who has been paying at least a bit of attention to the culture war surrounding the games industry should have already heard the word Blackrock get thrown around at some point or another, together with the term DEI. Over the last few years, DEI programs and initiatives have been tied up with a lot of the damage done to the games industry internally. It's not even just the programs and initiatives themselves, it's also the way that they have been used and the types of environments that they have fostered, the type of people that they have attracted to impacting the medium, and the type of people that they drove away from the medium. I'm prefacing this video with this because it's an important element of what we're going to be talking about in a second. It's important to understand that the simple act of ending DEI policies, programs, and initiatives across the industry is not going to be an automatic win and a game changer across the board. In fact, for some companies it's not even going to mean anything, because some companies don't even need these initiatives and programs to make the kinds of decisions that these initiatives and programs would force or compel a company to do. And it's also important to understand that Blackrock, while being a huge proponent of this garbage in the games industry and other branches of business and society, is not the only company that has engaged with this, and is also not the only source for these kinds of programs and initiatives. I guess they're just the most famous one in our circles. And so that's partly why when I saw the news saying that Blackrock was dropping their DEI grift in accordance to America's new policies, I didn't really feel much of anything. I've seen some people celebrating this on social media, and I suppose that from a certain perspective, the fact that this is being acknowledged publicly is good in a way, because it's like, well, I guess it's a couple of things. One, it's an acknowledgement of this being real, like the veil has been pulled back a little bit for all of those people who, who either don't believe in it or who have people in their ears telling them, no, none of this is real, it's all made up, these guys are all just chuds making shit up, blah 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 blah. And also for the morons themselves, even the ones with large followings like Xanderhall, for example, someone who reacted to a section of one of my videos right when I was starting out back in September or October, when I made my video on the Actman. As soon as I mentioned DEI, he went off about how I'm one of those people, calling me a fascist adjacent, and that DEI is not a real thing, it's just like a college thing that people ran with, they don't understand what it is, they have no idea, they're just making up nonsense about it. I wonder how this moron is doing these days. Anyway, beyond that, I suppose it's also good to see the public image of DEI taking a bit of a hit, like in the broader eyes of the culture. But besides this, I don't really see much of anything in this announcement because I don't trust any of these companies at all. These are companies that have been pulling disgusting power plays with their money for years. Power plays that were not elected nor made public. They had to be found out. Average citizens had no idea such measures were being implemented. Hell, many still don't to this day. The fact that it has to be hidden, the fact that it couldn't just be announced and pushed forward, in itself already shows the shady nature of it. Companies awarding those who played into their ideology, who did what they said, who complied with their goals, and penalizing those who didn't. In fact, worse than that, penalizing even those who might have wanted to say neutral or do diversity in a more natural and less forced manner, without unnatural quotas that compromise their products or their companies for a bag of money.
We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year. What we are doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted, okay?
We're doing the same thing.
And so you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And
A lot of this is tied to the ESG point system as well: environmental, social and governance, things that companies must follow in order to benefit monetarily from taxes, grants and other types of garbage. And I don't even say garbage because all of it is garbage, like no, some of it is actually pretty good. It's kinda like the DEI situation. ESG is one of those things that sound great when you're just hearing about what it is in layman's terms. Basically, they would tell you that it's a system that holds companies responsible and accountable accountable for various things within those parameters of environment, social, and governance. So for example, in the environment side, you've got stuff to do with energy efficiency, pollution, carbon footprints, biodiversity preservation, etc. And then in the social space, you have stuff to do with human rights, security, human resources, etc. And in governance, I actually have no clue. A quick look on Google and it pointed to stuff like ethics, combating corruption, fiscal responsibilities, stockholders' rights, so on and so forth. At surface level, this all sounds great, like normal regulatory stuff to make sure that companies don't do whatever they want and are complying with the law and not abusing their power and resources to do bad things. The problem is that those fancy words are extremely loose and there's a load of wiggle room for malicious manipulation to be enacted over the companies. For example, this whole DEI bullshit, we all see the damage that it has done, we all see how discriminatory the system has been, and the terrible social impact that it has had with divisiveness and radicalism. On its own, DEI doesn't even mean anything that bad, except for the E, I suppose, which means equity.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
But all of this DEI garbage ends up serving a purpose. It gives companies ESG points because of the S in ESG. And that's just an example of how, depending on who's in charge, depending on who's actually calling the shots here, you can turn something that is supposed to be good, that sounds good, into something doing harm. Basically, there's nothing you can't corrupt so long as you are the ones dictating what the parameters are. And as you could see from that clip I just showed, companies like Blackrock are the ones being judge, jury, and executioner in shit like this. There are these things that you must do, there are these numbers that you must achieve, there are these goals that you must reach. And if you don't, then you're going to get impacted. So yeah, I don't trust these companies at all. I don't trust their little announcement of swearing off of DEI. Loads of companies have been scrambling lately with this kind of thing, but what they end up doing is, in the end, is rebranding it or renaming it to something else, and sometimes it's pretty tricky too. Like I remember last year we saw Microsoft, saying that they were doing away with DEI programs, yet inside of Xbox, those continued. So it could very well be the case that Microsoft didn't do away with any DEI. They just announced that they were going to do away with it only to fucking rebrand it into something else. Or it didn't happen across the board and other little branches of these companies are still doing their thing with DEI as usual. We've also seen some companies within the gaming space claiming that they're no longer working with certain consultants only to be employing the services of another that does the same shit. Get used to that one going forward, by the way. Sweet Baby Inc. may be in shambles after getting lambasted through 2024 through no fault of our own. After all, never forget that the only reason Sweet Baby Inc. fell was because they put themselves in that place time and time again. Not only did they add nothing of value to the games they consulted for, resulting in the decay of quality, especially in the writing or character design department, but they also wore their disgusting intrusive behaviors on their sleeve, admitting to many despicable things, such as coercing studios to get hired onto projects by urging their marketing teams to threaten their superiors, basically putting the fear of the cancel culture on them if they dared not to hire them for a project.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Oh, terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't. Something that we actually got to see in action with Black Myth Wukong, a game that rejected Sweet Baby Inc. influence and then was hounded by game journalists before and even after launch. This is a company that expressed disdain for the industry and for gamers that they were working on and working for, and the desire to take it over and burn it to the ground. I have no sympathy whatsoever for what happened to it, and if none of these people ever got jobs in the industry again, I'd consider it a good thing. These aren't game developers, they are activists, and as an organization, Sweet Baby Inc. was worse than a parasite. Parasites usually latch themselves onto their hosts and develop a symbiotic relationship with them. The prey's survival is important for the parasite. Sweet Baby Inc. on the other hand latched itself onto studios, brought on absolute dogshit fucking ideas to the table, ideas that of course they trusted and implemented, and then they left with their bag of money as the studio released their games to the public filled with ideological bullshit that nobody wanted to play. What a sweet bargain it must have been to never have had to be responsible for your own failures, to never have had to have the success of your games be detrimental to the survival of your studio, basically just having your money regardless of copies sold, and to then still act like a victim and to be protected by the darling media. A very merry fuck you to Sweet Baby Inc. Sorry about that detour though, let's get back to the main topic. SPI may be in shambles, but there's other consultants just like it out there like Hit Detection with their own brand of idiots who feel the need to make public how much they hate gamers. I don't think we'll ever be getting rid of these kinds of consultants anytime soon. I don't even think they'll stop getting funded by companies like Blackrock. I think they'll find a way to still get funded outside of the, let's say, DEI system. At the end of the day, a loan is just a loan, you know what I mean? And when it comes to ESG grants, they're still going to keep getting them anyway because they're still complying with that shit. Another thing to take into account is that sadly the fucking EU is still all aboard on this kind of garbage as well. I say this as a citizen and taxpayer to the EU, as much as I wish that it wasn't so. So the EU will still carry on bankrolling shit like this whenever it falls within its jurisdiction, like they did with Dustborn for example. I don't harbor any hatred for Europeans, I mean I am one of them, and I've seen a lot of anti-European sentiment online over the past few days because of what is going on in the world right now. To all of you, all I gotta say is that, you know, Europe is much like America in this regard. There's normal people with their heads on their shoulders, and then there's the retards. But anyway, let's get back on topic. I think that companies like Blackrock, publicly announcing that they're stepping off of the DEI train, are still going to be doing their utmost to keep it going in other ways that merely don't work the same way that it has worked so far, while likely being subtle about it at first to not raise any obvious red flags that the Trump administration could catch on to. In other words, more renaming and more rebranding. For us, it's obvious when we see it, you know, the quote-unquote wokeness that is injected into a piece of media's world building, themes, writing, characters, stories. It can be extremely obvious as they are annoying, basically.
So, I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you
We don't care.
Jerry.
But there's many ways that people can do that without a direct attachment to DEI as a policy or as an initiative. Until now, announcing it was fantastic because it was profitable. It gave them brownie points with the media and on the internet. What changes now is that announcing it is not going to be a thing, but mark my words, it's still going to be there. It'll just be more reined in a bit to not raise so many flags. And this is for two reasons. The first, and to do with what this entire segment that I've been talking about so far has been about, is that Blackrock is not going to stop. This is what this company is. Without this company would lose its entire fucking identity. This is what they do, and they have always been incredibly aggressive and driven in doing so. So them just suddenly dropping it and making a little announcement about it, just being like, okay fellas, we're done, no more of this, I guess. If you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. Pun intended. This, if anything, is just a tactical retreat or, you know, just putting up a veil. Blackrock is tenacious, and if you ever want to learn more about how deep they go give Madame Savvy a follow. She gets literally autistic when looking into several matters and lays the information out for anyone to see and make up their minds. The other reason, and the bigger one for me, is to do with the effects that these policies and programs and initiatives have already had in the games industry. This touches other stuff, of course. This touches all of society, honestly. Like, this is across the board. It's not even just all of entertainment, it's society in general. It's the corporate environment, it's the education system, how individual schools were impacted, it's society as a whole having been brainwashed by the same agendas across so many different things, it's social media, it's news, play a video game, it's in there, watch a movie, it's in there, log into a streaming service, it's in there. If it's Disney Plus or Amazon, then holy
leader.
I'm here
She's
to tell
a
you right
powerful
now.
leader.
We don't
Yes.
care.
Let me tell you
We don't care.
Jerry.
You go to work, you watch the news at night, random advertisement on TV between shows, you go to fucking Walmart, it's in there. Fuck, not even the NFL got away with it. Your kid goes to school, it's in there too, so on, so forth. I'm just going to focus on the games industry on this channel though, or at least for this video. I don't mind branching out sometimes, but for now let's keep it focused. The way that DEI goals function are usually through numbers, like with quotas that come companies have to meet. I mean, it's not all through this specifically, but that's usually the big one whenever people refer to DEI hiring, for example. Other things that are part of it, but in a different way, are for example a push for narratives to be a certain way, a push for female characters to be presented in certain ways, forbidding certain language or jokes or story themes or masculine or feminine tropes. Like, things can get really muddy the more you dig into what DEI itself represents and the way that it is interpreted by people because of intersectionality and their own biases. But at the very top of things, there's the people who you hire to do these things. This is the main thing for me. Sometimes it's not even that DEI itself is the problem. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong, it's inherently discriminatory after all. But what I mean is that so much less damage could be done if it wasn't radical activists ahead of these departments and companies making these decisions. But I'm getting way ahead of myself, so let me step back a bit. For example, these narrative consultants like Sweet Baby Inc. They exist partly for this very reason. You know, I mean, obviously not every studio is going to have I meant to say not every studio is going to have DEI crazed activists obsessed with race and gender and intersectionality and shit working in-house to know precisely what changes to advise in order to make their games comply with these goals, to become games that are now adequate for the modern audience, adequate for our modern times, without any potentially offensive or tasteless content. So they would get in contact with these consultant companies and have them do it for them, giving them a big bump in ESG by making content that is socially responsible in accordance to our ideology overlords. But over time, a lot of these studios started developing their own in-house DEI departments. An example of this is Ubisoft and CD Projekt Red, who have it listed all over their websites. Both of them also have these little programs trying to unnaturally change the diversity of their teams and games industry in general by doing these programs targeting women only for CD Projekt Red and women and non-binary people for Ubisoft. And this is part of what I'm trying to get at. Like, we're not even just talking about game content anymore. We're not talking about just altering some designs here and there anymore. We're not even just talking about diversity quotas that they have to meet to reach these targets and score more bags of money from investment companies and looked out government grants. We're now talking about a full-fledged ideology growing inside of these studios' very own culture, which is obviously going to be noticeable in the products that they brought out. We can already see that with Ubisoft in spades, and we also saw it last year with BioWare. I actually never looked up if BioWare worked with any consultants when they were making Veilguard, and this is because it didn't even matter if they did, because we saw the developers, like we saw the writers and their kinds of posts, and we especially saw the director and the things that she wrote in her developer diary over at the BioWare website. Not just about herself as a developer, being transsexual in the industry, but also as to the identity of Dragon Age, where she threw up a bunch of identity politics nonsense into what should have been in regards to the game itself. This being because BioWare didn't need a woked-out narrative consultant company working with them to fuck up Dragon Age Veilguard. They didn't need any further DEI-related items at all. They had fostered it all in-house and prioritized it. They put up a director fully committed to it and paid no attention to maintain equality standards or anything else at all in regards to making an RPG. This was the natural environment at BioWare, and this natural environment gave birth to Veilguard naturally. And it's not to say that they don't have normal people working at the studio. I am 100% sure that they do, but it just didn't matter. The ideology ruled above normalcy, so they had no power to speak up or effect change even if they wanted to. And if, by chance, I am totally wrong and have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, then I would love for someone in-house from BioWare to explain why the game ended up the way that it did then. Why the decisions that were made the way that they were made, If it's not the elephant in the room, then I would love to know what it was. You also have quite a few colorful people inside of Dustborn, and by colorful I mean, ideologically colorful. I don't mean actually colorful. This is actually the studio's, the owner's major problem. He laments that his studio is so white. It's a sad side effect of the studio being from Norway. And as you will recall, Firewalk Studios also had its weird share of weirdos getting getting offended at people mocking their character designs. There was also the professor lady who wanted to be addressed as the professor, you know, on and on it goes. I've mentioned this in a previous video too, showing you guys these pictures from the Game Developers Conference of 2024, a haven for activists in the industry where they give full talks centered on this kind of garbage, the takeover of the industry with their ideological bullshit. In fact, that little tutorial that the owner of Sweet Baby Inc. did, showing people exactly what they needed to do to their superiors in the studios, you know, to coerce them into having Sweet Baby Inc. get hired and other consultant types, came from one of these conferences. Just last year in 2024, Kim Belair, the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., was once again invited to do more presentations. Again, a haven for activists in the industry. This doesn't mean that the entire industry is composed of activists. That doesn't mean that there aren't genuinely cool and refreshingly normal people working at these studios, doing their jobs and quietly wishing for normalcy again. Of course, those people exist too. And I mean, that's the ones that are there, because there's obviously the ones that aren't there anymore because they left, they couldn't take it anymore, and there's also the ones that got fired to make space for the diversity quotas. But it does mean that there's a lot of long-term damage, hell, possibly even permanent damage in some cases, to the industry in general because of the environment that these policies have fostered. So even if we were to truly believe that Blackrock is truly dropping DEI, and I mean truly dropping it in all forms, instead of just renaming it or shifting the language of its goals, you know, kind of like what happens with Bridge or SHRM, where it's essentially the same type of shit that DEI is, it's just that it has a different name and safer goals to advertise and account for. Because the funny thing about DEI, at least it's hilarious to me, is that it's illegal. It's literally discrimination. It's the most unethical shit you can think of. It's literal discrimination based on race and gender. So the fact that this got to the point where it was out in public is nuts in and of itself. It should show you the state that our society degraded to. Again, just to bring up how funny this shit is, we have, for example, CD Projekt Red announcing in their website that they signed this special letter, which is a committal to non-discrimination in the workplace, while literally running programs that are discriminating against men, keeping them from having the same opportunities being offered to women. I find these things funny every now and then, and probably more so now because of seeing the culture shifting a bit, and seeing that people are finally acknowledging that, number one, this exists, and to some extent, at least from America, that it is a stupid-ass thing that needs to end. Otherwise, I honestly would not find it funny. I would find it very infuriating because of the hypocrisy. Basically, definitions mean nothing to these people. Rules, laws, ethics, whatever, you name it, they mean nothing. It's just for everyone else, while for them, it's whatever the fuck suits them. I really hope to see many of these studios dropping this shit, especially CD Projekt Red. They technically don't have to because they're from Poland, so I don't think that they get impacted by America's policies to end DEI programs, but I just hope that they wake the fuck up and realize what the hell they're doing, the shit that they got themselves into, and get the hell out of it. To this day, it shocks me that this studio, these people of all people who cared so much about the simple art of making great games, went down this road. I'll keep myself from rambling on any further in regards to CD Projekt Red though. If you want to hear more on the topic, feel free to check out my video on it. It will be linked in the top comment and the description. Back on topic. Even if it was truly true that Blackrock and all these other companies like it were swearing off of this stuff, there would still be a lot of really bad damage that's already been inflicted in the games industry by having had this shit go so far and for so long that it fostered this environment that invited activists into it. It effectively changed the industry. Its DNA, it changed a little bit. Doesn't mean that it's lost forever, but it did change it. It gave them the perception that video games are a medium for them to inject their politics into it, that the entire medium of video games belongs to them and their whims, and while they can have their own little spaces within it, everyone else cannot have theirs because everyone else is supposed to be part of this supposed evil, oppressive majority group that is gatekeeping people from gaming, when it's not at all this. It's just that certain spaces should be certain spaces, you know, you build up a franchise, you do what works for that franchise, then suddenly someone shows up and says, I don't like this. This franchise doesn't appeal to me, and it should appeal to me and all the other 11 people that are just like me across the planet, none of which will buy a fucking copy of the game. But it doesn't matter because we should still be included, and if we're not included, then that means that it's bigotry, which is is total fucking bullshit. I mean, basically, we're the ones who are getting essentially evicted from our favorite franchises that we made super successful because we actually spent our money on it, supporting it, and now we're being neglected in trade for a modern audience that doesn't even buy these games. So we're standing here looking at these franchises sinking financially while also getting called gatekeepers. Make it make sense. Franchises that were very masculine or edgy or brutal or whatever, basically anything at all that carried any other value that these activists deemed as insensitive, intolerable, unacceptable, or exclusionary to their utopian view of society, had to be altered in some way. And it was all based on bullshit too, like these franchises didn't have anything wrong with them at all. They just made this shit up because they didn't like the fact that these franchises had a majority fan base that was mostly male. In many cases, this was the only problem that existed for them, so they'd made it their jobs to take it over and try to diversify its demographics. This shit is still going on today. Like literally this past week, Halo came out with this update to celebrate Women's History Month. Why the fuck would anyone care about that in a Halo game, dude? I also noticed this kind of trend back on Rocket League when I used to play it. Instead of giving me a cool skin for a car or whatever, they were handing out this kind of shit in form of cosmetics or player cards for whatever happened, you know, if it's February, it's Black History Month, if it's March, it's Women's History Month, if it's April, it's some other bullshit, of course in June we had Pride, so on and so forth. Of course this kind of nonsense doesn't automatically mean that they're trying to diversify their demographics. Sometimes they may very well just be pulling out a big virtue signal because of course, but one way or another it's really retarded no matter what the intention is. It doesn't belong. If I'm playing Halo, I want some Halo content. Don't get the designers working on nonsense that is not necessary. If I'm playing Rocket League, shit, give me a car. Give me a fucking car. Give me a cool decal or some cool rims. The fuck am I getting all this shit for? What am I gonna do with this? Better yet, who asked for it? Hell, I'll even be happier if you get people working on packs that I have to pay for, but that have cool stuff in it. I've always hated this concept of forcefully diversifying fan bases and demographics, or jobs for that matter, which is precisely what this equity bullshit means, equality of outcome rather than of opportunity. I'm a firm believer that everyone will naturally gravitate towards whatever it is that they like, and we don't have to have media or jobs or hobbies etc. be for everyone, and be literally forced to fucking have a balanced 50-50 ratio of men and women participating in it. We can have stuff that is just heavily skewed towards men, and we can have the same in reverse, heavily skewed towards women. In fact, we already have that. It's just that those usually aren't targeted, except female sports. It's just a shit that's made with the intent to appeal to men that needs to be fucking altered beyond recognition to open itself up to more people, otherwise there's some kind of problem. And if you're against this idea, then they'll call you an evil, bigoted gatekeeper. These activists got used to not just the power and control that came from this, but also the comfort and embrace that came from the biased games media and higher-ups in the industry, praising and protecting and coddling them for access, inviting even more of this shit to come on, and enabling them to be even bolder with the next game that they worked on, ending up where we are now, or at the very least ending up in 2024, where so much of this shit was so overt that it tanked games. The replacement of talent with gender and race-based virtue signalistic hiring has also taken a heavy toll on this industry. An argument often used is that DEI and wokeness don't make games bad. Bad games are just bad because they're bad. If a game was good and DEI and wokeness would not matter. These arguments very conveniently leave out the fact that DEI and wokeness is a total replacement of talent and merit. It's an ideology thing too, where if you're in a meeting brainstorming a game, it's not the best idea that wins, it's the most progressive one. For a more practical example, we can go back to EA and BioWare. I mean, who knows what got into their heads to make a Sims developer from Maxis the director of Dragon Age Veilguard at BioWare, a AAA RPG in a long-running dark fantasy franchise. It's like, DEI and wokeness are not why Veilguard went to shit, it was just a bad game. Well, in what fucking normal world, not influenced by the ideology that comes packaged with DEI and wokeness, the same ideology that fosters this corrupted environment, would, make that decision of getting Corinne Bush, a Sims developer, and making her the director of the game? Also, in what fucking normal world, again, would that same director of an utter embarrassment embarrassing failure, managed to get herself hired onto another RPG studio over at Wizards of the Coast. Like, step down from reality with me here for a second, just for a second. These are not normal decisions. The ideology itself takes over the decision-making processes at these studios. When you go that far, that's what happens. You can have a studio that works normally and kind of puts in little elements of diversity or progressiveness, while still making a good game, like Baldur's Gate 3 for example, or cases like God of War Ragnarok, where it's not about natural diversity, of course. Angrboda being black is not a natural diversity type of thing, it's a Norse mythology game, so that's an injection of obvious DEI, like it's obvious why the decision was made, but while still being able to maintain the game's quality. This has happened before and it will keep on happening going forward. But when a studio goes too far with this stuff, when the ideology itself takes over the decision-making processes at these studios because of activists in high positions who prefer to prioritize the message over the making of a good game, then of course it's going to impact the end product. And that's where we're at. We are years into a slow and steady corruption of the AAA space. Many of these studios could end their DEI hiring tomorrow and they would still have enough activists on board to keep fucking up any future game. What we need is a change of mentality from these studios. We need a true, genuine acknowledgement that this doesn't work and that something very wrong has been happening for the past few years. Only then can we actually expect change instead of more activism. A single question needs to be posed out of all of these people working in these studios. Are they able to set aside their political biases, their activistic whims, their desires to influence change and drive social impact through their games? Are they able to simply focus on making a good fucking game for once without letting their shitty baggage get in the way of it? Are they able to still work with a team that doesn't necessarily share their own personal views with the world? If yes, then off they go and make some games. If not, then off they fuck to find some work elsewhere, as these companies would ideally restructure and get back to what made them great in the first place, because a lot of them were truly great. And of course there's many issues that can befall a company. It's not just these ideologies that fuck up games, greed fucks them up too, ego fucks them up as well. Like, it's not just through DEI that we can end up with bad choices as game directors, such as what happened with Veilguard. Ego can do that too. Good old-fashioned incompetence has always been an issue and forever will be. Like, make no mistake, this is an industry that can make some of the worst decisions I've ever seen. It's an industry that can easily fall into really stupid trends, like when everyone wanted to make their own Fortnite or their own Overwatch, or when they were all chasing the live service trend. Everyone thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a live service. Some companies were even making multiple live services. And we're always going to be here to call it out. But yeah, right now, for this topic in regards to Blackrock and DEI, this is what we gotta keep our eyes peeled for, because the damage that this causes is massive. It's damage that unfortunately even goes with other stuff, like you can have a company being greedy and being retarded at the same time. That's what happened with Soy Squad, chasing the live service trend like 6 years too late, while also working with Sweet Baby Inc., giving us a story filled with shit. So yeah, it's not just the culture war stuff. Like, I can easily switch myself off from culture war point of views and just analyze a game and the massive fuck-ups within without mentioning ideological stuff at all. I did my best in regards to this when it came to reviewing Veilguard. I kept it about the content. And this is because this can really lead a studio down a path that replaces talent and passion for the craft with an obsession with race and gender and intersectionality bullshit, and a drive to impact social change by using games as a vehicle for it, and I'm just so tired of it. And no wonder Eastern releases have been so refreshing. But anyways, I'm going to cut it off here. I just want people to not be fooled by the news. It's fine to raise a glass and have a little celebratory moment, but the industry is still the way that it is, ingrained with it to the point where they don't even need a DEI program or initiative to tell them to hire more unhinged activists and put shit content into the games. They'll just do it out of their own pleasure. And these people in these companies aren't going to stop pursuing these goals. They're just going to either tone it down and bide their time until the next president or the next administration, or they're going to continue their agendas under different names and safer classifications that can't be scrutinized so easily. So stay vigilant, but please also, like, be reasonable. Don't lose yourself. Don't open fire on everything that looks a certain way or on random independent independent games that are just doing their thing in their own corners. Don't be hostile, especially with each other. I've seen so much infighting in the community lately, and it's so stupid. Doing stuff like that is just being extreme in your own way. It's just being unhinged in and of itself, and being unhinged is what leads to the other side looking like the ones with the common sense and with the reasonable ideas. So don't lose your cool, don't become like the woked out maniacs, and have some fun. Play some good games, rekindle that joyful spark for the medium. Don't let cynicism eat you alive, basically. Don't get so lost in the sauce that a mere woman character or a mere character of color, for lack of a better word, I hate saying that, already is enough to set you off and have you screaming DEI and woke and this and that. Doing that dilutes the effect that we're trying to have, and then when something real comes up, something that actually needs to be focused on and fought against, no one's going to listen to us, and our power, for lack of a better word again, is going to be super diluted. We'll no longer be people who are actually finding issues in the industry that need to be removed to make games better. We're just going to be unreasonable morons screaming at everything. We're basically going to be wokies. So I don't know, maybe keep that in mind. Thank you very much for watching either way. Please take care of yourselves, like the video if you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing if you haven't yet. I'll see you guys on the next one.